I'm Bridget Carter, 38, Boston tech founder with quiet scars. I chose a harborside restaurant, velvet and chandeliers, to reset everything. Weeks of planning, a perfect table, a fragile hope. I'd built an app, sold it for millions twice. Yet at home, I was still the shadow. Tonight, I brought first-class tickets to Hawaii. A bridge, not a bribe. A hand, not a leash. Wendy slit her envelope, eyes bright with contempt. "You're still trying to buy our love," she said. My dad leaned back, laughing like a verdict. "No one here actually likes you," he announced. My mom twisted her napkin, silence as tradition. I kept my hands steady. I smiled once. "Understood," I said and stood, heels cold on wood. Have you ever faced something like this? Tell me in the comments. That was the moment I stopped asking to be chosen. Top of form, bottom of form. Growing up in Cape Cod, I was always the shadow. My sister Wendy, 3 years older, was the star. She was vibrant, confident, and adored in every room. My dad's eyes lit up at her soccer trophies, her debates. "That's my girl," he'd say, his voice warm with pride. For me, it was different. A sigh, a shake of the head. "You're too shy, Bridget," he'd remind me, like silence was a flaw. My mom rarely looked up from her books, letting his words stand. When I was 10, I built a model rocket for a science fair. I spent nights adjusting fins, wiring carefully, perfecting every detail. It soared higher than every other, winning first place with cheers. I raced home, ribbon clutched tight, expecting a smile. At dinner, Dad didn't look up. Wendy's speech won a scholarship. Wendy smirked. "Some people just aren't built for attention," she teased. Her words carved deeper than she knew. My throat closed, but I nodded. High school was no different. Wendy led the debate team, her charisma filling the house. I escaped to the computer lab, the glow of screens my refuge. I taught myself to code, building calendars, task lists, tiny apps. Dad called it messing around. Mom asked if I was keeping grades. I worked quietly, because quiet was all they expected. But inside, a promise smoldered. One day, I'd prove myself undeniable. Not with words they mocked, but with something they couldn't ignore. That promise kept me company through birthdays with the wrong cake. Through Christmas mornings when Wendy's gifts sparkled and mine felt like afterthoughts. Through dinners where laughter filled the room, but not for me. The silence around me grew heavy, teaching me to swallow pride whole. I learned to build walls with code and ambition, brick by brick. And still, I dreamed of the day they'd finally look at me. College gave me freedom, but also distance. Wendy studied marketing, the real path, as Dad proudly put it. I studied computer science, nights spent coding in cluttered labs. My apps were small, calendars, to-do lists, but people bought them. Each sale felt like oxygen, proof my quiet spark mattered. By 23, my task manager app exploded online. A tech giant bought it for $8 million. I called home, voice shaking with excitement, heart begging for approval. "That's nice," Dad said flatly, then pivoted to Wendy's new ad job. Mom sent a card, no signature, just typed words. Wendy didn't bother to respond at all. The emptiness in their reaction hurt more than rejection. They didn't hate me, they just didn't care. I moved to Boston, built a startup, launched again. Another app, millions of downloads, conferences, awards. I spoke on stages to thousands, strangers applauding my ideas. But in Cape Cod, at Christmas dinners, I was invisible. Dad quizzed Wendy about campaigns and clients, pride pouring out. Mom refilled glasses, nodded, eyes sliding past me. Once I mentioned a national tech award. Wendy laughed. "What for, geek stuff?" Dad chuckled beside her. Mom stirred her coffee, silent. The ribbon of my childhood, the rocket I built, nothing had changed. Still, I kept building, quietly. I poured myself into late nights, screens glowing like companions. Every line of code whispered, "You matter, even if they don't see." Every new download was a small rebellion against their dismissal. I taught myself patience, grit, and how to smile at indifference. But craving their approval never disappeared. It clung to me like a thread tied around my chest. I wanted just once to hear Dad say, "That's my girl." I wanted Mom to look up and finally see me. I wanted Wendy to stop smirking long enough to admit I'd won. That's why I planned the dinner. The restaurant, the chandeliers, the tickets to Hawaii. I thought maybe a grand gesture could shift something inside them. I imagined Dad's rare nod, Wendy's smile, Mom's voice filled with pride. I imagined the bridge rebuilt, fragile but real. I thought money could make them listen. I thought love could be purchased with proof of success. But deep down, I knew better. And that night, when their words fell like knives, I understood. All my silent victories hadn't moved them an inch. They still saw me as the quiet girl in the corner. If you've been through this, you're not alone. I carried my wounds in silence, until silence became my weapon. College gave me distance, but also a taste of freedom. Wendy studied marketing, the real path, as Dad proudly repeated. I studied computer science, buried in cluttered labs late at night. My apps were small, calendars, task lists, but strangers downloaded them. Each sale felt like a secret victory. Each review whispered, "Keep going." By 23, my Task Manager app exploded across the internet. A tech giant bought it for $8 million. I called home, my voice unsteady with excitement. "That's nice," Dad said flatly, pivoting to Wendy's new ad campaign. Mom mailed a generic card, unsigned. Wendy never replied at all. The emptiness was heavier than rejection, a silence sharp as glass. I moved to Boston, built a startup, launched again. Another app, millions of downloads, contracts with global companies. I spoke at conferences, lights blinding, strangers cheering my vision. But at Christmas dinners in Cape Cod, I was invisible. Dad leaned toward Wendy, eyes bright with pride. Mom refilled glasses, pretending not to see me. I once mentioned a national tech award, nervous but hopeful. Wendy laughed. "What for? Geek stuff?" Dad chuckled beside her. Mom stirred her coffee, eyes sliding away. The ribbon I'd once clutched as a child might never have existed. Still, I worked. Still, I built. Late nights bathed in the glow of monitors became my sanctuary. Every line of code was a brick in my private fortress. Every milestone another defiance against the family who dismissed me. Yet inside, craving their approval clung like a chain. I wanted Dad's nod, Mom's proud voice, Wendy's smirk erased. I wanted to be undeniable, impossible to ignore. I rehearsed it all in my mind. A dinner table transformed into recognition. My father's voice softening, my mother finally lifting her gaze. For weeks, I pictured the bridge rebuilt by one gesture. I convinced myself love could be bought with proof. I convinced myself their silence could be cracked by spectacle. That's why I planned the Boston dinner. The chandeliers, the harbor view, the first-class tickets to Hawaii. Each envelope embossed, each seat reserved with fragile hope. I imagined laughter turning warm, eyes finally bright with pride. But deep down, I felt the old ache rising. What if nothing had changed? What if I was still the shadow? The night arrived. The table gleamed, my heart steady but trembling. And when Wendy sneered, when Dad mocked, when Mom stayed silent, I knew my victories had never mattered. To them, I was still the girl fading in corners. If you've been through this, you're not alone. Hope can blind you, but silence always tells the truth. The night at the Boston restaurant didn't end with silence. It planted something sharper, a decision pulsing like fire in my chest. I walked out into the harbor breeze, heels striking the boards. Their laughter followed me like chains, but I didn't look back. In my condo, glass towers glinting outside, I made the call. Sell the Cape Cod house, I told my lawyer, voice calm. It was my inheritance, my grandfather's final gift, mine alone. By morning, the deed was gone. The locks changed, deal sealed. 2 million in cash, wired instantly. No hesitation, no regret. 3 days later, Dad's call erupted like thunder through my phone. What the hell did you do, Bridget? His voice shook with rage. That house was our legacy. You sold it like a selfish brat. I held the phone away, his fury no longer breaking me. For years, I'd begged for kindness. Now, I hung up instead. Wendy's text came next, venom dripping between the words. You betrayed the family, selling Grandpa's house like that. Delete. Silence. I owed her nothing, not even a reply. Then came the knock at my door, my mother's silhouette trembling. She sat on my couch, purse clutched, eyes darting away. We're hurt, Bridget, she whispered. Why didn't you talk to us first? Her voice was soft, but her words hollow. No apology. No defense of me. Just another plea for control disguised as sorrow. I waited for regret, for acknowledgement, but nothing came. When she left, the air was lighter without her silence lingering. I turned instead to Eric, my colleague, my quiet anchor. In a cafe humming with espresso machines, I spilled everything. The tickets, the dinner, the sting of my family's mockery. Eric listened, eyes steady, his hand warm over mine. You've been carrying them financially for years, haven't you? He asked. I nodded. He leaned closer, voice edged with certainty. It's time to cut them off. They don't deserve you. Then he paused, lowering his voice further. Have you checked the family trust lately? I froze, my stomach knotting. What do you mean? He explained Wendy's spending. New car, trips, luxury escapes. The trust I'd built, millions of my dollars drained recklessly. Eric offered to investigate, his tech skills perfect for the task. Let's find out what she's really been doing, he said. His words carried no doubt, only determination. I walked out of that cafe with new clarity. Selling the house was only the beginning. This was no longer about approval. It was about power. My power. I had given them everything, money, comfort, chances to see me. All they gave back was scorn, laughter, silence. But now I had proof they couldn't ignore. My sister's greed, my father's rage, my mother's absence. They thought I'd always stay quiet. They thought my silence was weakness. But this time, silence would be my weapon, and their undoing. 2 weeks later, Eric's laptop glowed with answers I dreaded. Transaction after transaction scrolled across the screen, each one damning. Wendy had siphoned $500,000 from the trust. Vacations, handbags, a flashy startup doomed before it began. She hadn't asked. She'd just taken. I stared, chest heavy, jaw tight. She didn't even hide it, Eric said, his voice clipped. She thought you'd never notice, I whispered. She never believed I'd check. She thought I was weak. Weak. That word burned until it became steel. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Transfer every cent, 1 million left, to a Boston foster charity. Do it quietly, no announcements, just paperwork sealed. A week later, it was done. My trust reborn as hope. I didn't tell them. I didn't have to. News traveled fast. Boston business blogs whispered Wendy's collapse. Her firm under scrutiny, her startup a public embarrassment. Colleagues eyed her with suspicion, investors pulled away. The empire she mocked me with crumbled on headlines she couldn't control. Dad's voice exploded through voicemail, thick with fury. You're tearing this family apart, Bridget. First the house, now this? You're punishing us for nothing. You're destroying our name. I listened once, then deleted it. His rage couldn't chain me anymore. Then Wendy arrived, storming into my office uninvited. Her hair wild, her voice sharp as broken glass. You ruined me, she spat, slamming papers on my desk. You donated my money, my future, to strangers. I rose slowly. every nerve alive, every scar awake. "Your money," I said, voice steady, cold as steel. "That trust was mine. I built it. You stole it." Wendy's face twisted, but I didn't let her speak. "For years, you laughed when Dad dismissed me. You smirked when Mom stayed silent. Now you want sympathy because the mirror cracked?" She shook her head, desperation flickering. "You'll regret this, Bridget. Family sticks together." I stepped closer, the words slicing free from decades of restraint. "Family doesn't mock your victories. Family doesn't steal your future. Family doesn't use silence as a weapon. You lost that title years ago." Her lips parted, searching for a retort, but nothing came. She grabbed her bag, stormed out, door slamming like thunder. I exhaled slowly, chest rising with something unfamiliar. Relief. Eric entered moments later, eyes meeting mine. "You finally said it," he whispered. I nodded, shoulders lighter than they'd ever been. The confrontation hadn't broken me. It had remade me. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet girl in shadows. I wasn't the daughter begging for approval. I wasn't the sister fading under laughter. I was Bridget Carter. I was whole. I was enough. And this time, my silence was the loudest sound they'd ever hear. Winter wrapped Boston in snow, but inside me, the ice thawed. The lawsuit over the Cape Cod house collapsed in one hearing. The judge dismissed it, Dad's pride crumbling in the courtroom silence. Wendy's empire unraveled, her face in newspapers beside the word embezzlement. Her ad firm distanced itself, clients gone, reputation in ashes. I didn't celebrate. I didn't reach out. Their downfall was theirs, born of greed, silence, and entitlement. I carried no guilt, only clarity. Family wasn't supposed to feel like a battlefield. In therapy, I found the truth I'd buried for years. I had spent decades chasing their approval, tying worth to scraps. But worth doesn't come from voices that never see you. It comes from building, surviving, standing tall when no one claps. Eric became my anchor. In a glowing cafe, snow falling outside, he knelt. "Bridget," he whispered, sliding out a small ring. "Will you marry me?" I said yes, tears blurring lights, joy rushing like oxygen. For the first time, I was chosen, without conditions, without silence. 1 year later, I walked down a candlelit aisle. The pews filled with friends, colleagues, and mentors, my chosen family. Eric waited, steady and certain, eyes filled with pride. My parents weren't there. Wendy wasn't either. Their absence no longer hurt. It simply felt irrelevant. I built a foundation in William's name, funding young women in tech. I saw in their bright eyes the fire he once saw in me. My legacy wasn't the house or their approval, it was this. I learned a truth that carried me beyond pain. Family isn't blood, it's who shows up. So I'll ask you, have you ever cut ties to save yourself? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated, join our community by subscribing to the Drama Family. Because sometimes, walking away is the loudest victory of all.